Okay, procedures. There are two kinds of procedures. You notice the concept here? Rote procedures and meta procedures. A rote procedure is something that you do the same way every time. It's like long division. It's an algorithm. It's a ritual. You do it the same way every time and you're guaranteed to get results. Superstition is often like a rote procedure. The computer's acting up, Control-Alt-Delete. I don't know what's wrong, but I know that Control-Alt-Delete will fix it. A rote procedure works kind of that way. Rob Fauché, who taught me a lot about instructional design when we worked together at Plato, told me a story of a fellow that he met at an airport, a German fellow, and he was also an instructional designer, and they got to talking about procedures and algorithms, because he's that kind of guy that starts that sort of conversation with random strangers in airports. That's Rob. And they were talking about procedures and algorithms, and Rob, as an example, pulled out long division. And you know how long division works. You write one number and you have the bracket, and you write the other number underneath, and you do this repeated subtraction thing, and you put the numbers at the top, and you get your result. His German acquaintance was flummoxed, could not understand it, did not understand how it worked, saw that it did work, but was absolutely baffled. And then he proceeded to demonstrate the German method for doing long division, which Rob couldn't understand and was completely baffled by, but he could clearly see that it got the same answer. I'm going to link to an Abbott Costello video that talks about procedures. And then there's another clip that I'm going to link to that talks about procedures and rote procedures and rituals and what can happen when a ritual goes wrong. You see, just like with understanding systems, procedures are operating a system. So you need to understand failure modes and where you can get off the track and what happens when you do something wrong, where you miss a step, and how do you recover from that if you can recover. And that'll be the third video that I post down below. I'm just going to let you look at it and then maybe talk about it in the discussion boards. Because it's very important when you're teaching a rote procedure to identify where the student can go wrong, so that when the student goes wrong, they can recognize that they have gone wrong and fix the problem. That's why when you're teaching basic arithmetic, for example, if you do a subtraction problem, you check your answer by adding the things back up again. Same way with division or multiplication, you want to be able to check your answer, or at least estimate what your answer should be, so that you can see if you've made a mistake in the procedure. Now, sometimes an error is not recoverable, right? If your souffle in the oven falls, there's no getting it back. And that's an important thing to know as well, so that you can avoid the situation that results in the unrecoverable error condition. So take pains when you're analyzing procedures to look at that. Now, that's true for rote procedures and meta procedures. A meta procedure is simply a procedure that is done a little bit differently every time. It's like driving to work. You can't do that with your eyes closed, even though you might say that you can. You really can't, because the traffic's a little different every time. The weather's a little different every time. The road conditions may be different. There might be a pothole. There might be rain. There might be an icy spot. So it's a meta procedure. You do it a little bit differently every time. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, at least I hope you are, gosh, there's a lot of similarities between procedures and fact chains. Indeed, there are. And so when you're learning a procedure, very often you memorize the steps. You memorize the fact chains. And remember, in the simulation video, I was talking about the NASA simulator that was the 4 cafeteria chairs with the piece of plywood up there. The astronauts were practicing a procedure of going through their checklist and touching the controls, going through their checklist and touching the controls, and just kind of reaching out and touching the controls. That's a procedure, but it was also a fact chain because it was a checklist. So those things are very closely related. So, procedures are operations performed upon systems. They may be rote procedures that you do the same way every time, which could also be a ritual. It could be superstitious behavior. Not necessarily, but it can be. And then there are meta procedures, which you do a little bit differently every time. Next up, problems.